lesson we will discuss caves, and with reference to that, we will discuss the landscape, the significance of the Indian landscape. Now, for that matter, so topic for this lesson is a trip to Malabar Caves. Subtopic is does the trip for anything. Now, in order to understand this trip to the caves, we need to first understand what the landscape, how landscape has been perceived in this novel, what is the geography as is perceived in this novel. Just a little bit of a background. Foster visited India for 6 months from October 1912 to April 1913. And during his stay in India, for these 6 months, he was really stirred by his experiences that was reported according to Guardian 2014. Many of the characters in this novel we find during his stay are the portrayal of the people he had met in India. For example, in Lahore, he was introduced to Mr. Gorbule, who talked to him about ragas and sang to him. In Hyderabad, in fact, a friend of Ras Masood had an outburst against English. So anyone who has read Passage to India is actually familiar with these characters. So upon his return, he began writing the novel in July 1913. However, the novel was put to a halt. Again, he visited India in 1922, but at that time, this time like a private secretary to the Maharaja of Divas. Oliver Steribras, who was who had actually edited the original manuscript of this novel, he believed that there was always the question related to caves, that what had actually happened, and that is the mystery of this novel, which we will discuss later. But just for this point, that this episode of caves, Malabar Caves, is it's central to the novel. Now, as far as the Malabar Caves are concerned, Malabar Caves are it's a fictitious landscape inspired from the Barabar Caves, which were which Foster had actually visited during his stay from 1912 to 1913 near Bankipur, where Ras Masood was living. Now, looking at this perspective, we can see, it really concerns us that Foster found in India a vast physical and mental landscape, and as a result, we whether it's as according to Sulleri 1992, that the novel opens with and closes with the evocation of geography. For example, as is the case with as is mentioned, except for the Malabar Caves, and they are 20 miles off the city of Sindapur, presents nothing extraordinary. Now, coming to the main focus of our discussion in this lesson, we find that the landscape of India is it does not really suggest the natural landscape, and it may mean that it does not really represent the real India. In fact, as according to Sulleri, that Foster really turns to visualizing this landscape as though to an act of cultural description that is relentlessly exotic in its intent. We further look into this confusion where the landscape, what India has to offer. We not only is the description that India was certainly dim this morning, though seen under the auspices of Indians, the sky to the left turned angry orange, the sun rose without splendor. Accord as through the terrain of thoughts of Adela, we are given a further the psychological the mental landscape of India, as on page 116, chapter 14. Unfortunately, India has a few important towns. India is the country, fields, then hills, jungle, hills, and more fields. The branch line stops. The road is only practicable for cars. To a point, the willow cords lumber down the side tracks, pass fray out into the cultivation and disappear near a splash of red paint. But then she asks herself that how can the mind take hold of such a country? Is it really this vast? Is it the vast to the extent that any foreigner is for any foreigner this is too vast to be to digest? At this point, it's important to take on the traveler's perspective, to take this novel from a traveler's perspective as well. Now, if we peep into the mental processes of Adela, we can see from this very instance as further on that generations of invaders have tried, but they remain in exile. The important towns they built are only retreat, their quarrels, the melees of men who cannot find their way home. India knows of their trouble. She knows of the whole world's trouble to its uttermost depth. She calls calm through her 100 mouths, through objects ridiculous and august. But come to what? She has never defined. She is not a promise, only an appeal. Now, with this particular instance, if we can perceive that this novel undermines the traveler's desire to get something, to know something, to venture into this exotic, and that very much aligns with what Salery argued. The anti-exotic element is it's quite it does prevail in this landscape of India as perceived in this novel. So this desire to get something from this journey, and it is also the reader's desire to get something out of this narrative. All these elements, both these desires are undermined in this novel. So, and then of course from this point it can be that rather than an exciting excursion, how would we expect that what kind of trip to caves really is would be that exciting. With this landscape, further, as Adela says, that nothing embraces the whole of India, nothing, and it was Akbar's terrible mistake. Now, this anti-exotic element of India is what even Dr. Aziz is unable to notice or is unable to explain, as is evident when Adela was perceiving the journey is remarkable and the plane is striking, and all of a sudden the plane is quietly disappeared. and what she could look into, could see were these caves, the granite, very dead and quiet. Um, Aziz did not notice this peculiarity of the landscape of India, and as a result, um, their description of this kind of excursion is not at all attractive. The place is not attractive, and it is not even worth visiting. So, and at this point, even according to from author's perspective, that Aziz could not explain what anti-exotic element this is, which does not attract, which did not attract the guests. And he actually, at this point, he was lost in it without Professor Gorbule like themselves. So they did require the presence of Gorbule at this point to explain that what this anti-exotic element really is. Now, to this point, we are also given a bit of a glimpse if we go back to the description of the sun. The sky to the left turned angry orange, color throbbed and mounted behind a pattern of trees, grew in intensity. Was yet brighter, incredibly brighter, strained from without against the globe of the air. They awaited a miracle, but at the supreme moment, when night should have died and they lived, nothing occurred. Now, this nothing occurred. Again, going back to the same issue, that this the excitement of this trip is met with nothing. And then the landscape takes them back to the landscape of Britain, and there is we have some issue. It does give us some issue of belongingness. So, can we really say that whether the landscape of India, as is described so far, how it is really contrasted with the land or with England, as as it's figured out that England has its regards, it as regards sunrises. Do you remember Grasmere? Grasmere, of course, the place of the lake poets, and of course related with romanticism, romantic poetry for that matter. Oh, dearest Grasmere. Now, the lakes and mountains in that land, they are beloved, they are romantic, they are manageable, and that is what is perceived as a kindly planet. But when it comes to India, India is what? It's an untidy plain, and it is stretched to the knees of the Malabar. So the description of land is quite unclear, ambivalent, and if we look at this, if we